Hi, welcome to another episode of Candid with Credible. Today, I'm really excited because I have with me Alok Mittal. Alok, besides being a very dear friend, is also a part of the SME lending ecosystem of fintechs, similar to Credible. Alok, welcome to the show. Just to give you a quick background, Alok is the founder and CEO of Indifi, and Indifi is a leading fintech platform focused on small business lending. Alok has had a extremely colorful career, if I may say so. He's been a veteran entrepreneur. Uh, he started out with Jobs Ahead, which eventually got sold to Monster, and then he moved to the other side of the table. He became a venture investor, starting with Bearing and then moving to Canaan Partners, and then once again set up Winterfee. So, Alok, welcome again, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
taking time out to do this.
Thank you.
Look, you've been, a veteran venture investor starting out with Bearing and then, of course, with Canaan. You were on the founding board of Indian Angel Network, and you've done several angel investments on your own. How do you see the startup ecosystem, evolving rather in India since your days at Canaan?
Absolutely. So I think there has been a tremendous progression. Actually, since we started our first company to when I was in Canaan to now, and this reflects both in terms of the numbers, number of startups being formed, number of unicorns, amount of fundraise, and those things have literally, taken an order of magnitude jump every 5 to 6 years, right? So
Right.
this is almost the Moore's law in operation.
Sure.
When we did our first startup, a $50 million exit was a great exit. By the time we got to 2012, 2013, a $500 million was a great exit. And today, clearly, there are a set of companies that are breaching the $5 billion mark. Coupled with activity down the line, if you look at the number of companies being incorporated, number of companies being provided seed capital, number of graduates from IITs who choose entrepreneurship as their first vocation. So that's the number side of the story. I think what is even more interesting is the qualitative end of the story, where entrepreneurship, risk, failure have become accepted norms in the society, right? So I still remember, I had to go and visit one of our employees' parents, right,
Really?
to convince them that they should allow her to join a startup.
Wow.
Another person did not join us because that person wanted to get married before they joined the startup, because otherwise the
They wouldn't
marriage
get,
prospects
yes,
would suffer. So I think we are way past that now,
sure.
and clearly in a territory where this is probably the most aspired for role. That confidence is seeping into smaller towns.
Right.
So entrepreneurship is truly becoming very, very pervasive, not just in the larger cities, not just in the elite campuses, but across the length and breadth of the country. So I think those are some of the qualitative changes which are very encouraging.
No, I just remember a similar incident, where I had to actually go and meet the parents and speak to them, convince them that, look, this is a good company. And this guy was really senior. I mean, he wasn't, someone that you hire at an entry level. And I guess that's changed dramatically for both, our companies as well as the ecosystem. But it's interesting. You've had you've seen both sides of the table. Uh, you've been a very, very successful entrepreneur, then moved to being a venture capitalist, and then moved back to being an entrepreneur. So what motivated that shift back to entrepreneurship?
So I had spent about 9 years in full-time investing. By the time I stepped back and just asked the question of what do I enjoy doing more, and I figured that I would enjoy building something more than backing entrepreneurs. In some sense, I think there is also this sense that you can continue to back entrepreneurs
Sure.
through the angel route. So I have done, I don't know the exact number, somewhere between 70 and 80 angel investments.
Wow.
So in some form, that desire to invest behind what's new, what's coming up, stay current with the trends, I think that has expressed itself in form of angel investments. But really, my bigger passion has been around building stuff. At some level, I also saw small businesses as that continuum of entrepreneurship that needs to be supported.
Right.
Over my own startup journey and investing journey, one of the things that really drives me is entrepreneurship.
That's
And the
amazing.
notion that 85% of Indian entrepreneurs, the small businesses, should be regarded as credit unworthy, it just doesn't resonate with me, right? You can't have 85% of the entrepreneurs who are unworthy of credit. So I very much see this as a provider side problem, and it's compelling. It's hard, but it's worthwhile trying to solve for that.
No, absolutely it is. And it's, that statistic is appalling to start with. Can you imagine not having the ability to access capital when you most need it? And that's a problem that I know you're solving, and we're trying to solve. Uh, but tell us the story of Indify. How did you start? What came about? Any challenges that you faced? Anything that you'd like to
Okay.
share?
Yeah. So, I think for me, the decision to start a company came before, what specific idea. So, as I said, about 2014 is when I stepped back to say, do I want to continue with venture investing? Do I want to do something else? And through that period, I figured that I wanted to be in the operating shoes. Now, as I did that, I started to explore really three different ideas at a somewhat serious level. At Canaan, we were early investors in a company called Lending Club in the US, which is the largest peer-to-peer lender in that market, now a bank. And we looked at the possibility to translate that kind of an investment to the Indian market and came to two key conclusions. One, the small business lending markets to us seemed more attractive than consumer lending markets, just by way of being able to build differentiation around the whole underwriting framework. Right? The second was that while Lending Club started as a peer-to-peer business, by 2014, 2015, their primary source of capital was already institutional.
Right.
And so we said that if we want to build a platform for lending, then we want to build an institutional platform because that's the capital that can scale. So this notion of build a SME lending platform on back of institutional capital was something that we had arrived at even while I was at Cayman. Now, as an entrepreneur, you just don't want a thesis; you want the operating blueprint, right? And so, middle of 2014, I got in touch with my current co-founder Siddharth, and we started to then scan the market for saying, where's the opportunity?
Right.
And where we found our sweet spot was really in ecosystem-based lending. So we observed, partially because of my earlier stint as an investor, that while every internet company was a consumer internet company, they were really building a lot of small businesses online. And that could provide us with the wedge to start to serve underserved MSMEs for their credit needs, utilizing both the origination and the data strengths that sit in those ecosystems. So that became the starting point for our journey.
As a venture capitalist, you must have seen a lot of businesses come to you, pitch for capital, and then you must have rejected several of them as well. How does it feel to be on the other side when you're fundraising?
So, we rejected several, but many of those companies that we rejected actually have gone on to become great businesses, right? So, one thing that venture business does teach you is humility. Not get locked to your own decisions, and the fact that you will, miss many, and hopefully you will win some. I think in the entrepreneur shoes, one of the things that is important to do is to step away cleanly from that notion of, if you may think of it in the entrepreneurial ecosystem as a power of influence, right? As an entrepreneur, the only thing that works is what you did yesterday.
That's right.
And the earlier you get used to that fact, the better it is. So I think the entrepreneurial journey, 50% of entrepreneurial journey is to carry the sales bag. And that is what we've been doing, not just to our customers. As I mentioned, a lot of our business is partnership-oriented business.
Right.
And so, I'm continuously selling to partners. In fact, some of our partners who I knew very well in my venture shoes took us close to 5 years to convert.
Oh, wow, really?
Right? And simply because the business model that we were proposing was not something that they saw as a strategic fit to what they wanted to do. And it took us literally. I sent a message to one of those guys later of saying, 4 years, 6 months, 11 days, we finally have you. So I think facing rejection is an integral part of entrepreneurship, and not just in the fundraising domain, which we've seen enough since, but also when you're selling to customers, when you're selling to partners, when you're selling to employees. So yeah, I think, and that's part of the fun. The part of the fun is to get that feedback and keep refining.
But it's a great place to be in today, right? The ecosystem lending space, because everyone wants to be a fintech now. So whether you are a consumer business or you're a pharma business or whatever you are, everyone wants to enable credit in some form or the other. So
Yeah, I see this slightly differently, Nirav. So I do think the imperative on part of many people to be a fintech is coming from the fact that many times fintech, and I won't even say fintech, just lending,
sure,
becomes the only monetizable tool.
yes,
Okay, so there is this whole search for a business model which is gravitating towards lending. But if I roll back 500 years, right, lending was not supposed to be delivered by a standalone entity called a bank. That was never the natural state of affairs, right? This is our invention, an artifact of trying to separate trade and financing, right? Reducing conflict of interest. Whereas even today, in the offline world, massive amount of money flows where trade and financing are integrated, right? When a distributor finances a retailer, right, that distributor is doing both things simultaneously. So I
sure.
do believe that the natural flows of money must happen with business transactions. And that is the reason why we envision a future where every business must be a financing business, not just because they need a business model, but just because there are reinforcement factors between trade and financing.
No, that's insightful. But talking about small business lending and MSME financing, let's talk about some of the challenges you see in this space, right? Especially for MSMEs when they're trying to raise uh, credit or capital for credit. Where do you see the impediments in that space today?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there are some issues which are I would put in the category of genuine issues, right? Underwriting is non-trivial. Classically, there has been huge amount of information asymmetry, which then leads to this conclusion that 85% of the Indian entrepreneurs are not credit worthy. Fortunately, a lot of that is changing. Right, data is becoming more available, and part of the reason why we chose this ecosystem approach is if you think about trade and financing flowing together, that reduces information asymmetry
Sure.
fundamentally. Right, architecturally, there's less information asymmetry in that construct than in going through an independent channel. But there is a equally, if not bigger, set of issues which are just incumbency related, right? Which means that we have this whole edifice of how capital must flow, how businesses must get evaluated, uh, even how something as fundamental as anti-money laundering must express itself in terms
Right.
of KYC norms, right? Now there are better ways today of doing that,
Sure.
right? Which will give you more confidence that this is a genuine business and genuine cash flows. But unfortunately, regulation always lags behind innovation. So I think we are at a point where incumbency is what is pulling back the growth of lending businesses in the country. And to that extent, the initiatives that RBI and the government continue to take, regarding enabling more and more experimentation, seeing what works, what doesn't, I think those are critical to advance the credit inclusion goal in the country.
I mean, you brought up a good point, Alok. I mean, if you think about formal credit to the MSME space, where banks are concerned or larger NBFCs are concerned, and there is the reason why 85% of entrepreneurs don't get access to financing is because incumbent institutions don't want to lend to them. Where are the impediments? If
Yeah.
you and I can lend to them and do that successfully, why can't these guys do it at scale?
No, and they will. There's no doubt in my mind that they will. See, I think one thing to remember is that all of this is a very, very recent phenomenon.
Right.
right? So availability of data, existence of ecosystems, all of this we are talking is less than 5 years old, right? And so you would expect startups to be more nimble and agile, like in any other industry. But we have seen, and I'm sure you have equally so, that banks and larger NBFCs are very, very hungry for growth. Some of the best talent in the country sits in those organizations. So in
Right.
my mind, there is no reason why they will not do this. I think the question for them will be, what do they regard as their core capabilities, and where is it that they want to partner, right? Now, if a bank is handling 50,000 crores book, right, a small bank, is this 5,000 crore going to be exciting for them in the next 3 years to build ground up capability? Or are they going to say, let me go and partner with three fintechs and still enable credit inclusion for those 85% of the excluded merchants, right? And I think in that regard, India is probably front of the line,
Sure.
right? In US, the narrative always was that fintechs are going to kill the banks.
Right.
2007, right? And slowly and steadily, it's a more symmetric competition between fintechs and banks. Right? India, even when we started our company 6 years back, was always on the vein that banks want to partner with fintechs. So none of us really ever took a confrontation approach to banks, and banks have reciprocated to that. So today, for example, I know for you that will be a much larger number, but for us, where we are trying to get to the unserved MSMEs, 40% of our business is still coming, through the bank's balance sheet, not through our balance sheet taking wholesale debt, but in partnership with banks directly, right? And
Right.
that's the part of the business that we think will grow faster
No,
because
absolutely.
banks have shown that appetite.
And in your experience working with financial institutions, when you companies like us want to digitize everything, want to move on board quickly, don't want physical documentation done, how do you deal with all that? I mean, today banks unfortunately have regulations that they need to deal with. Uh, so
Yeah.
how do you address those issues?
See, I think there are certain constraints that are imposed by regulation, and I would hazard that KYC is probably the only meaningful one there,
Right.
right? But there is a lot more that is imposed by so-called compliance, which is internal to the bank,
Right.
right? Now, many of those things have come in to arrest the operational risk going off the charts, right, in the conventional environment as it existed 5 years back. Right.
Sure.
Now, part of the reason why we chose to do this hybrid model where we have our own balance sheet and then we work with other financial institutions to fund loans on our platform is because we think that on various dimensions there will be experimentation required. There'll be proof of demonstration required to move the financial institutions in a certain direction, right? The first one, which is critical, is obviously, can you show me the proof that your credit works,
Sure.
right? That's the big one, right? And the reason why bulk of the entrepreneurs are excluded from formal financing is because there isn't enough confidence that credit will work, right? So we can innovate on credit, we can show the proof of that working, and normally what we have seen is that once we show that data, then the front runners in banking and NBFC sector are happy to participate. We have taken the same approach towards compliance and process innovation. So for example, we started electronically signing our loan kits about 3 years back. The first of our lenders on the marketplace adopted it about 9 months back.
Really?
Because at that point we were able to take that to them, the data to them, and demonstrate that between a physically signed kit and electronically signed kit, there is no difference in delinquencies. Right? So there are many of these things that we have built capability, generated data, and that has helped us, convince our lenders. The second is, in many cases, the state in transition is actually more expensive than either of the two, beginning or the end state, right? So think about this. A bank already has an established branch infrastructure,
Sure.
right? They need to get a loan agreement done. Right? Now, getting to the electronic, training their people on it, getting someone on the phone to help the customer is not the most natural path. They can actually do a better job by just using that fixed capacity they have deployed, sending a person over, and within the day getting the loan done. And so we've seen bankers just look at us very, very surprised, right, of saying, why would you even do that, right? Why not just send a person and get it done? Now, at the core of it, we've realized that we are solving 2 or 3 challenges for these banks, right? One is the credit challenge, but second is the operating cost challenge. Most banks and large NBFCs haven't figured out how to do a 5 lakh rupee loan profitably, right? A lot of public sector banking system does that because they have a mission for public service in addition to making money, right? But hardly anyone makes money off a 5 lakh rupee MSME loan, right? And we've built this full life cycle infrastructure which banks can ride on, so they don't have to build their whole life cycle management infrastructure, right from origination, credit assessment, digitally and remotely, onboarding processes, account monitoring, collections, upselling, right? Today, we are at about 50% of the operating cost structure that best-in-class NBFCs are at for a 5 lakh rupee loan, right? And we think that that's a key contribution that we have to make in order to trigger the market.
Sure. And do you see banks realizing that 5 lakh rupee loans and sub 5 lakh rupee loans are profitable to do if they partner with fintechs, or would they much rather just buy out your portfolio at some point in time?
There are people of all sorts. Actually, buying out portfolio, I have seen that banks are perhaps even more nervous, right? Even though you may do risk structures around it.
But it's illogical, right? I mean, isn't it just logical to buy out portfolios if you already know that credit works?
Yeah, I think part of the issue, Nirav, there is that most buyout structures are that banks want, where there is risk mitigation and so on, are not balance sheet remote.
Yeah.
Right. So in some sense, they are taking a risk on our entity when they do that. Now, obviously, all of our wholesale lenders are doing that, and they feel comfortable doing that, right? But for a bank to go in and do this with a triple B company, sometimes is still a challenge. But what we have done is, on our platform itself, we have provided different risk mitigation structures for banks to come in and get their feet wet, right? So many banks will come in and say, okay, I want to see what's going on. I want to, lift the hood and experience this, but I don't have a lot of risk appetite. And they will, by and large, do a capital arrangement of some sort.
Right.
And then when they start to get comfortable, then they will switch over to our regular commercial model where, they take the risk, all of that, right? And so providing this range of commercial options for them to come in, dip their toes, but then, dive in if they would like to, is another role that our balance sheet plays to make sure that transition is smooth. So yeah, partnering with banks will require addressing their concerns.
Sure.
Whether it is commercial, whether that is procedural, whether that is cost and economics linked. But I think that that is how the businesses are going to scale. I don't think businesses are going to scale by becoming a new 50,000 crore balance sheet business.
Right. And there has been a lot of push by the government as well, right, towards MSME lending. They came up with trades. They redefined the definition of MSME. PSL, of course, is a big driver. And yet you don't see that surge happening as expected by the government. So
yeah.
Do you think this is effective, or what's going wrong here?
Yeah, I think there are two things which, in my mind, require significant improvement, right? The first is the transmission of capital is broken, right? I think everyone realizes this, including the government. And when I say transmission of capital, I refer to the unserved, underserved MSME segment, right? There is obviously a lot of transmission at the top end of the equation. For example, in the last 3 years, and I'm not just talking about the COVID crisis, the bank rate has gone down by about 200 bips. The borrowing rate for triple B NBFCs has gone up by 200 bips. Sure. So the risk spread has gone up by 400. I went to the rating agencies and I said, guys, all this must be getting priced to risk somewhere, right? So can you just share data on NBFC delinquencies over time, over last 20 years? And I want to spot out how many triple B NBFCs have defaulted. The answer is zero.
Zero.
It's not one, it is zero.
Wow.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Now you look at that picture and you realize that the system is broken, right? So credit transmission for the unserved, underserved MSME is simply broken and not working. And there will have to be new mechanisms. Even some of the mechanisms that came in during the COVID period, right, are not effective at that. So ECLGS has a lending rate cap at 14%, right? The underserved MSME doesn't get loans at 14%. Right?
Sure.
TLTRO, got limited largely to existing customers of bank or AA, AAA NBFCs. Right? So I think the regulators will have to fundamentally rethink that if this is a core priority, how does capital flow to this segment? The second big piece is that in many problems that need to get solved, the regulators have taken a let's build it ourselves approach.
Yeah.
Whether that is, when I say build, I'm not necessarily saying be the operating company, but at least let's, drive what are called standards, right? Account aggregator, OCAN, TREADS, right? Rather than answering the question, what is the minimal thing you can do to trigger a market?
Right.
So, for example, in the United States, invoice assignment is a legal obligation. So I, as a financer, can buy an invoice, send a notice to the transaction payer, right? And they have to honor that purchase of invoice. They don't have a choice.
Right.
Now, there is no infrastructure on which all of this needs to get done. It's a law, right? And that triggers the invoice assignment factoring market, right? In a very, very distributed sense, right? Now, TREADS overall, is it a net positive? Absolutely, right? But what it does is it keeps the control with the payer, right? It has essentially become a reverse factoring platform, right? It has not transmitted power to the seller who needs the money. Okay. And so architecturally, some of these things then become the barrier to innovation itself, because, when you say this thing needs to be fixed, but we've already done that.
Sure.
So rather than acting as a trigger for innovation, these things start to become barriers to innovation. So I think those are the two things in my mind that we need to rethink from a government and regulator standpoint.
And well, you brought out an interesting point: transmission of capital, especially to the smaller or mid-sized NBFCs today is a big challenge, especially to us as digital lenders or platforms enabling lending. What other challenges besides capital do you see, or credit capital for companies like us? What other challenges do you see for digital lenders?
Yeah. So, the other challenges are not necessarily in the realm of what I would call, regulatory or relating to the government.
Sure.
But I do think that access has always been an issue for MSME lending, right?
Right.
So while there is this outside-in notion that if you're giving a loan, you will find a queue outside your door, so far we have not found a queue outside.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there is a category of customers that any business is chasing, and distribution is always a problem. Now, we have solved that by going through ecosystems. You have solved that by going through corporate supply chains. But each business does need to solve for that, and the growth of the business is contingent, on how well we solve for that. Underwriting is a challenge. That is the reason why there is so much underserved mass out there. Again, the approach we have taken is to specialize in a few industries, and hence build better insights there. I know that both you and us, to some extent, also rely on technology to provide tighter controls in the lending process,
Sure.
and hence lower the risk. So I think any lending company has to have, solve for the value chain of saying, how will you, who's your customer, how will you distribute and scale distribution? How will you solve for credit? I'm saying that credit is not a problem is a big problem, right?
It's a big challenge.
Yes. So I think that needs to get solved for. And then as we scale all the scale issues, right? Liability side of the equation, risk management, all of that becomes an issue. Financing is an issue. Equity financing is an issue, because as much as you could, you could point to the incumbency effect in the growth of the industry itself. I think there is a similar incumbency effect in my prior community as far as balance sheet oriented businesses go. Right? I don't think investors have been able to look beyond net worth multiples.
Exactly.
And it will take some successes to demonstrate that is the reality. But so far, that continues to remain a challenge, even in the industry which you would think is the most trailblazing of all.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, right? I mean, balance sheet businesses who are transforming the way credit is underwritten or the way customers are served are still being treated like any other NBFC.
And since I've been on both sides, I always think that it's the entrepreneur's prerogative to sell. So my approach to this is that you and I have to do a better job of telling that story.
Well, fortunately for us, our balance sheet is extremely small, but nevertheless, I think that's going to remain, a conversation that we would have to sell rather than investors want to, automatically buy, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But look, this has been a fantastic conversation, Alok. Very, very insightful. But before you go, I have one last request, and that is, what advice would you give fellow entrepreneurs who want to embark on a fintech journey? What would you tell them?
Yeah.
What should they be focusing on?
Yeah. See, I think for entrepreneurs who are just starting out, first thing that I would suggest to them is, keep that word fintech outside of your office premises. And the reason I'm saying that is because many times these buzzwords tend to communicate a value unto themselves, which does not exist. Right? Ultimately, it is about who's your customer, what value are you going to bring to the table, how defensible is that value, how quickly can you scale, right? And I've seen entrepreneurs where the fact they're doing fintech itself becomes the differentiator, which it isn't, right?
Sure.
Especially in a country like India, where there are many great public platforms that have come by, whether it is Aadhaar, whether this is UPI. So a lot of foundational technology is not proprietary, right? It is a public infrastructure, and so value to customer, differentiation, and scale are questions that must be thought through without reference to buzzwords. The closer you can get on the ground, the more you can talk to your customers and understand really what moves them. In my, and I'm turning 50, so in my jaded view, it's the best foundation of a business. Rather than catching the next wave. So that would be my biggest one. Second, I do think that in financial services, domain and tech are both very important as entrepreneurs start to construct their teams. I think it is important to have that balance between the domain knowledge and the ability to breach the state-of-the-art domain knowledge.
Sure.
So I think that would be the second thought that occurs to me.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Alok, for taking time out and doing this today. I think this has been one of our best episodes so far. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Neeraj. Thanks for having me here. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And wishing you and all the fintech entrepreneurs all the very best. I do think that there's a transformation that is happening right now. And I promise all of you that the grass is much greener on the other side of the transformation.
You're very kind. Thank you, Alok.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.